So here we are again. Welcome to Centered.Live with real conversations about what grounds us and lifts us and helps us live with purpose and clarity and compassion. Your hosts are Randy Burgoyne, that's me, and Paul Malloy. We are both husbands, fathers, teachers, longtime friends. Even though we're 1,400 miles apart, we're together. And I might mention that we're men of tremendous experience and faith.
And deep faith.
Grounds us, helps us with what we do here with Centered.Live.
Right. Absolutely.
So today, Paul, we got a hard topic. I thought our last one was going to be a hard topic, and it ended up being really good, I think, talk about tech and education. Here we're going to talk about some other things in education and in business, and that is ethics in technology. And that includes artificial intelligence or AI.
Probably more particularly AI, I would think. I mean, when you really think about it, technology is often at its very beginning, at its genesis, controversial.
Right.
You know, and it's funny because sometimes something was invented and it was embraced immediately and then became controversial. Such was the case of dynamite. Well, and going back even prior to dynamite, you could, in a sense, you could say that gunpowder was, or black powder was, something that was immediately embraced and then later became controversial as it became the major form of weaponry through the 15th, 16th, and so forth centuries moving forward. And we could say the same thing about splitting the atom. You know, that technology was immediately embraced and then weaponized and became controversial in that process. So it's not just the technology that we are surrounded by now and today. It's definitely the question of if we're using it wisely, if we're putting technology to good use, then it has a benefit to mankind. And if somehow we are mismanaging it, misusing it for any sort of ill purpose, then maybe we need to reconsider.
Yeah, and last week we came up with a phrase. I think it was from one of the sources we quoted that said that technology is evolutionary, not revolutionary. And that applies to a lot of things that we've talked about. It applies to dynamite. Yeah, maybe the initial part of the gunpowder and development of explosives was revolutionary. But since then, we've evolved. Now, some say, well, discovery or invention of movable type.
Right.
The Gutenberg press. But type had been used for thousands of years, where they carved out reverse letters and put it in ink and then stamped a page. But it evolved into an automated process, and that's what the Heidelberg press got to be so famous for, is automating that movable type process. And so as we talk about things, we're going to talk about a lot of things that are evolutionary in it. And maybe 2 years ago when ChatGPT really hit the market and got the interest in things, that was a revolutionary moment. But since then, we've had a lot of evolutionary things. Had a lot of people jump on the bandwagon and want a piece of the action to get involved with artificial intelligence. And one thing that we left off with, and I think that you can probably bridge us here, is from last time was tech in the classroom.
Right.
Now AI tools. So are students cheating when they use AI tools like ChatGPT or
Such
Gemini?
an excellent question, because on the one hand, it's not strictly speaking plagiarism. Plagiarism, is when you literally take somebody else's work and pass it off as your own
Mm-hmm.
without any kind of acknowledgement that this came from source A, for example, right? You may not quote somebody that had already written a phrase or a whole paragraph or a whole concept, right? And in that case, then it's considered to be plagiarism. But Chat GPT and other of the large language models don't actually do that. They are creating something that is unique using millions of sources as their database, in essence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're right. Is that cheating? But at the same time, an English teacher, English language arts teacher, would probably say, but they didn't actually create the essay or the report. They just simply described what that essay should include or what the report should include, and then Chat GPT or some other version similar to that just spit out the result. And so you end up eliminating all the research, all of the critical thinking that would go through that process to allow the student to actually learn something from the research and the assembly of that report. Another place that we see that kind of power, for example, is in math and science. My wife, who teaches math, certainly has seen students firsthand take their phones out and aim the camera, basically, of the smartphone at a problem on a test, and then look at the answer, because the phone will essentially take that problem, and it doesn't matter how complicated the problem is, it will give you the answer. Now, again, the question is that an advantage or is that a disadvantage, in that my wife wants the students to understand the process of arriving at the answer, and now you've short-circuited that entire process.
Yeah,
Yes, I have an answer, and it's going to be the right answer, but do they understand why? And is that actually an important part of the learning process, or is it actually something that we don't even really need anymore to know that what the process is? We just simply need to know the answer.
Yeah, and see, I think the proponents of AI in the classroom are saying, well, it's just like a calculator.
Right.
Is a calculator cheating? You don't do as much longhand, but you know the basics. Yeah, you have to know the basics to use the calculator, but it helps you as a tool move forward. And that's what AI needs to be. Yeah.
You have to know how to use the thing, right, in the right order. But yet, certainly, Randy, when you and I were first in college, I know that I had a professor who said that using a calculator was cheating.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up actually needing to retake the class. And the second teacher teaching the exact same subject said, you can use calculators.
Yeah, that's confusing for the student and makes it difficult in the learning process. But
by the way, I passed it the second time with the calculator.
Well, in one case in my class, I had college trigonometry, right?
Right. That's actually, yes, pre-calc. Yes.
Pre-calc, right.
Yes.
And I took the class, and the instructor was really quite good. He explained things very well, but I had a creative mind, and I could skip steps in my head, right? And I would write down the answer, and I'd go up and say, here's the answer. And he'd go, yes, that's correct. But you only get half credit if you don't show your work.
Show the work. That's exactly where my wife is fighting her students every single week.
Show your work. Show the steps you got to get there, because then we know you understand
the topic.
And see, with AI, that helps you skip some of that step.
Yes. Yes.
But here's, you talk about taking a picture of something and have AI fix it for you. Last week, my grandson called me up and said, "Hey, Grandpa, I've got a controller with my game console that's broken. Can you come fix it?" I said, "Oh, sure." So I loaded up my soldering iron and screwdrivers and everything, thinking I was going to have this shattered thing to look at. Well, it was his Nintendo Switch controller, and they
Okay.
seen them. They attached to the side of the portable device.
Yes. Yes.
And he had put it in his backpack, and one of the controllers had just snapped off and left.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't know what to do. So I thought, well, I wonder if ChatGPT does. I took a picture of the piece and the controller and a picture of the whole one, the one that was still working. And ChatGPT told me how to fix it.
No.
I unscrewed, told me what screws to undo, how to put the pieces back together, screw it in. And it said, oh, and you might be missing some pieces. So you might have to use a little glue to fix this piece. It knew what to do.
Wow.
I put it back together and it worked. Now, that's a terrific technical reference. And if you're using AI as a reference tool, like an encyclopedia, then it's got some great power to it. But, that's kind of an isolated case where it's a good thing, right? It's not like skipping the assignment by taking a picture of the math problem and having it solve it for you. But anyway, that's a little side point there. But
it's an interesting point, right? I mean, it saved you time. It saved you a lot of research too, which again is time. And as we often say in business, time is money, which is absolutely true. I still have to wonder though sometimes about how this translates then into business. Again, do we embrace it as a way of saving time and therefore money, or to make more money? I don't know if you heard, but just within this year, and maybe a little bit at the end of last year, there was an AI system that began to buy and sell stock on the New York Stock Exchange and ended up in 30 days increasing its original allowance, which I don't remember now how many. It was just a few $1,000s, as I recall, but it increased the return in 30 days by 100%.
Wow.
So the same group said, well, let's run it again with a bigger budget and see what it will do. And it, again, in 30 days, even though the market was going up and down, it still was able to increase the return on the investment by 75% because it was able to analyze the trends and make a decision whether to hold or sell. And then at what point do you buy it back? And at that point, you're throwing out people, potentially you're throwing out people who make a living understanding those same kinds of trends and making recommendations to their clients, which can be big corporations as well as people like you and me.
Yeah.
Is that fair? Is that a good thing? Mm-hmm. Do we just need to adjust and roll into a different kind of future that says that for certain kinds of jobs, a human is replaceable?
Yeah, and that's part of the big question is where is it, evolutionary into changing how we do our work. Now, if you think back when you were a kid and you were thinking, yeah, what do I want to be when I grow up? Well, it was fireman, policeman, whatever.
Fighter pilot.
Fighter pilot. Yeah. Well, I wanted to be an EMT. I thought that was great. You'd watch the emergency 911 show, and I'd go out and rescue people from off the top of the electric pole or whatever it was. But my career did not exist when I was a kid. There's no way I could have dreamed that I was going to be this kind of a technologist. I had no idea. I didn't know I'd be, running networks and connecting computers and helping, AI engines and talk to each other or whatever. But oh, and that reminds me, I wanted to differentiate a little bit between what a large language model is and the AI engine. So a large language model is just that. It's a data set. It's maybe a humongous data set that is instructional to a language and a set of knowledge, a basic knowledge. And there are other data sets you can add to that that would be additional knowledge. It might be science, it might be engineering, it might be music. All those kind of things are just additional knowledge. Where it gets a little bit questionable in the ethics is how what data is brought into it. If New York Times was kind of upset at ChatGPT at OpenAI for indexing all of their issues in the past, saying, "Hey, that was ours." He said, "No, it's history, it's knowledge. We don't quote you directly, but we have the knowledge from other sources. How can you say it's yours?" And so those are the kind of things that come in, and it's the AI engine that does the work and puts together things in a way that's presentable and communicates with the human, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of pieces to an AI engine, and quite often the large language model will be just language and what's written. Well, you've got large music models, you've got large whatever image models,
Right.
movie models, all
Right.
those type of different models are different. So if you ask ChatGPT to create an image, it's going to a different model to get that. They don't always talk together. Now they're getting better and faster, but they do talk to each other. But in a business environment, certainly it can help an employee be more effective. For example, I set up a system where a client could download all of their accounting records for the year and say, "I need to know all the invoices that were sent to XYZ company in August of 2023 that were between $500 and $1,000 and had this particular product in it." Boom, it found it faster than they could going through their accounting system itself.
Hence saving time and therefore money.
Right. But it took a lot of preparation to get to that point. But those are some things that can really help a business to thrive by having that kind of automation.
Right. And another area where apparently AI can help and in business is when a customer engages initially and they're trying to describe what the problem is, an AI drive system can analyze in a lot like your Nintendo Switch issue, right? But what it will do is it analyzes, okay, here's all the possibilities, and it keeps honing until it knows the scenario well enough that it's either going to give you a possible solution or it's going to pass you off to a higher level expert that may be needed with the information that it's already gleaned, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. In addition to that, of course, one of the other areas that has long been a challenge for especially international companies is translation. And I know that in the early 80s, when I was living in Japan, that my friends and I, we would laugh all the time at the very poorly translated from Japanese to English T-shirts and things that were on cereal boxes and things that, because it was hilarious. They didn't understand the nuances of English. any more than we could make some pen strokes and say, well, that's a Japanese kanji. It wouldn't make sense, right? There's a system to it that natively we don't understand. But the chat AI has the ability to look at those large language models, and now the translations are much, much more accurate.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you're talking about from English to Spanish, whether you're talking about English to Chinese, or any language, or vice versa, right? We are getting better results than needing to hire interpreters.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
Faster, and therefore theoretically cheaper. It still is one of these things, though, Randy, and I'll give you a really interesting thing that happened just tonight. Ann and I were talking about the challenge of understanding the student loan forgiveness systems, plural, and all of a sudden my phone, which was sitting on the counter as we were eating dinner, it was just sitting on the counter, and it came up with and it began to read the text that it came up with. So my phone was listening to this conversation and then gave us information based on federal student loan forgiveness programs that we may not have been aware of. It was about a 5-minute explanation. And number one, I didn't ask for it. Number two, it was listening and understanding what we were talking about. And number three, the answer was actually quite good. But again, it did so without any permission, if you will.
Yeah.
And at the same time, my smartphone consistently lets little dumb typos through on a text message that continually embarrasses me because it's not smart enough to know that I meant this word, not this word.
Yeah. There's some disconnect in the disconnect in the technologies right now. Yeah. Well, and that brings us kind of to our next topic, is the kind of the dark side of big tech in business.
Okay.
And, it might be something like your smartphone listening to your conversation and then queuing up ads. And I think everybody's experienced this where, you're talking about, oh, gee, should we replace our dishwasher? Yeah, it's kind of been noisy. Do we need a new dishwasher? And the next time you get on your phone, there's an ad for dishwashers.
Absolutely. Have seen that over and over and over again.
Yep. That's part of what Google does, and Apple.
Mm-hmm.
They glean some of those conversations in metadata, which is technically not stored or used as personal data, but it's there, and feeds you advertising based on your information. There's also, Apple has been accused and came up with a statement that said, your updates for your Apple device don't slow down your device. They are making the battery life more efficient. But in reality, what happens is if you have an old iPhone, like a 6 or 7 or even an 8 now, and you do a software update, Apple has a little slowdown routine that they put on.
Oh, no.
Make your phone less appealing and more likely that you'll go and buy a new one.
Oh, yeah, that is dirty pool.
Yeah. And Microsoft does that with the updates. If you've ever gotten an update and you noticed all of a sudden Microsoft Edge is now your default browser again, or you notice that the marketing permissions have been changed and all of a sudden you start getting ads right in your Windows again, that's kind of their justification. Well, you have Windows Home and your payment for it is to watch ads pop up in the corner of your screen. But you can disable that. You can go in 12 pages.
If you know how.
Yeah,
or
right.
Maybe if you ask an AI engine to tell you how.
Believe me, AI is tremendous for tech support. It's just, and does that put us tech support guys out of work, or does it make us happy?
Right.
It's an evolution thing where we've got to get used to it and say, I'd have people, neighbors, family members that would text me questions about their computer. Oh, I got this Windows update and I got this problem. I would, instead of replying me, I'd go in and say, just take their text, and I'd put it into Chat GPT and said, how would you reply to this text? Boom, it gives it, copy it and paste it in. Here's their answer. Go to this website and here's a little instruction on what you need to do. And that took me 30 seconds, and they have a better reply than if I had sat down and thought about it and talked about it and spent 20
Which
minutes.
would have taken you a lot more time.
Right. And so as a free resource, it's wonderful. But, again, it's that evolution that we're trying to work towards instead of a revolution. And those dark, okay, here's the dark patterns is actually a term that is used with developers in the ethics of user interfaces manipulating the choices of the user. So it's like when you get a sales call, and they, especially around election time, you'll get calls and saying, did you know that so-and-so was arrested and has a misdemeanor that's outstanding, and yet they're running for office? Are you going to vote for them still? That's kind of leading question. They throw something shocking to you and then ask you if, like, well, no, I'm not going to vote for that person then, if that's the case, or whatever. But that's just one little example, but they can frame things on your screen to get you to answer a certain way and believe a certain thing.
Yeah. So in other words, we're being manipulated. And by the way, that's actually one of the reasons why I ultimately got out of high tech, is because I was working for a company that did data mining and data analysis on corporate websites. So it was intended to be a tool that could look at usability. It could look at all of the content and the context and be able to make recommendations on how to essentially help lead a customer to a buying situation, right? And make it more appealing and more encouraging. And in truth, as I was then creating marketing programs to downplay like you said, the dark matter, and upplay, in a sense, the fact that we know who you are, right? So when you come to XYZ's corporate website and it says, welcome back, Paul, we're glad to have you. And we see in our database that the license for this particular piece of software hasn't been updated in 6 months. Would you like to update now? Yes or no, right? And suddenly you're saying, we have your credit card on file. We can just charge the $9, right? Immediately, and you will have the update within a couple seconds, right? And to me, it started to feel like I was facilitating that manipulation, and it didn't actually sit well with me. And that was one of a number of reasons why I thought, I'm not comfortable with this ethically. And so, yes, absolutely, I can see how tech is so marvelous. Today, I went to Discount Tire, and the technician came out and used a scanner that was mounted on the back of his phone and scanned the tread of my tire and told me how it was worn on the inside, the center, and the outside. down to the 32nd of an inch. And in so doing was able to tell me, okay, number one, your tires are this old. And number two, not just the wear bars, which are, molded into the rubber, but, was able to tell me, okay, your inside is worn more than the outside. Well, you could probably look at that and see it if you took the tire off, but he just used a scanner that came across the width of the tire.
Yeah.
And then from there, it became, okay, so now all four tires are actually wearing a little bit differently. And they're all due to be replaced,
Yeah.
And so he used it as a tool that he was able to show me the numbers. And I was quite impressed by that because it is a tool that facilitates knowledge.
And that's the real power of the technology tools. And I suppose that our point here is to educate people so that they know that those kind of deceptions, those kind of dark patterns are out there. But yet those are good things that be able to help you solve a problem quickly as a reference tool, as a diagnostics tool, as a support tool, where those technology can be wonderful. And if we're educated enough to know that when you see a dark pattern, you're able to recognize it. Like, I know years ago, 1985 to be exact, I took a media and communications class for my business major at the University of Utah. And we learned a lot about what they called at the time yellow journalism, sensationalism, like
exactly.
the tabloids and things.
I would teach my students about that as part of our history discussions. Yes.
Yeah. The tabloids were, a big thing then of, the dark patterns, so to speak, the manipulations.
Right.
But today, everybody can be an advertiser. You can get on there and I can have this product that will save your life. It is really important for your health. This is XYB innovator amino acid that just is needed by your body. And if you have these symptoms, if you breathe, if you or have white skin, if you have black skin, you need this type of. Anyway, that's the kind of thing that I see. And now I see that and I just go, oh, yellow journalism. And I can't hardly stand to watch the news because there's so much of it today. It used to be that you had some ethics in business and news that you could handle that kind of thing. But it's just a rare thing anymore.
And not just on television or other media. You certainly see it. I know that as I read news, still do read the news on CNN, for example, and then they give you tons and tons of clickbait.
Yep.
But again, that clickbait tends to be modified to something that you're already more or less interested in, right? And I think it, in a way, to a lot of good news sites, they get a bit of a black eye, if not a big black eye, because of the clickbait that brings them revenue, but is not actually helpful, and in some cases completely and totally misleading. And yet these big news sites will say, well, it's not our responsibility to vet the reality or the truthfulness of those who are advertising with us. Well, it used to be that newspapers and magazine publishers did actually vet. You can't advertise something that actually doesn't work or is not viable.
Yeah.
That's against the law. That has seemingly, it has been thrown out, and now we get anything goes, a laissez-faire in terms of advertising. And we've been there before. This is actually one of the, interestingly enough, this is one of the cycles in history, and I know we need to wrap up, but if you go back and you study the transition from the 19 teens into and through the 1920s, this laissez-faire business attitude of, if you buy it and it's a crock, it's your fault. You should have done more research. That anything goes. If we can sell it and get away with it, that's awesome for business. Ultimately, that created a cascade of problems that ultimately resulted in not just a national depression, the Great Depression, but a worldwide depression that destroyed the economy of the United States and multiple other countries around the world. And I fear that I'm seeing a pattern playing out all over again.
Yeah, I can see that, and I hope maybe our Centered.Live presentations that we do will help people recognize those dark patterns, those manipulative things, even in the news, in your social media, in so many different ways. So, well, this has been a great discussion, and we could go on and on. There are a couple of topics that we didn't address, and we're going to save for another episode. I think they're going to split those up. But before we end, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you like what we say, please feel free to share with others so that they can learn more about these dark patterns and get them out of your lives.
And for those who disagree, please let us know why and how you disagree, and help us to see another point of view and augment our own understanding.
And hopefully we haven't used dark patterns to irritate people into disagreeing with us. But we would like to really have some critical replies on our information.
We're not afraid of that.
No, we're not. But two topics that we're going to address in the future is tech abuse, including pornography, and the growing concern of those type of things, and also cyber threats, hacking and malware and ransomware, and talk about the ethics of even cyber defense. There's a lot to cover in those areas. We're going to cover those in future episodes. So stay tuned and enjoy our Centered.Live. Any last comments, Paul?
I just think that, again, we say it often, that it is incumbent upon us as human beings to do our best to research and understand the reality of any issue, any advertising, any challenging situation that we may find ourselves in, and not be a knee-jerk reactionist to something that somebody says. And we just need to take the time to research and know what the realities are.
Right. And we hope we can help you along that way. So thanks all. Thank you, Paul. And we'll see you next time on Centered.Live.